I am joined today by Captain Joe O'Gwyn. He runs on the lower miss and on the canals, to my knowledge, but I'm sure there's a lot more to him here. Mr. Joe, welcome to the Between the Levees podcast.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you.
Tell me where it all started, bud. Where were you born?
Originally Mobile, Alabama. So a roll
Did you
tide.
move? Did you move around growing? I won't hold that against you. Did you move around growing up?
No, not really. We we were in Mobile till I think I was about to I think around 13, 14, 14 maybe, and then we moved to Minnesota. My dad bought a dairy farm up in Minnesota, and we stayed there maybe about 2 years, and then moved back to Mobile. That's where my mother still lives there now.
What did your father do for a living before the dairy farm?
He owned his own business, building cabinets. He had a cabinet shop, and he contracted with, worked with contractors with building cabinets for new houses, and he did some remodeling, but it's mostly new build.
And what did your mother do growing up?
My mother never worked. She was just a housewife.
Okay. Uh, was anyone in your family in the maritime industry before you?
No, I never got into the maritime industry until my first marriage. Well, I'll take that back. I actually started working offshore after I got out of the Navy. Uh, so I started offshore, and then my first wife, a lot of her family worked inland, so that's when I switched to inland.
How was growing up in Mobile?
Oh, it was good. I mean, we weren't rich, but we weren't poor. I mean, my dad worked hard. I mean, he provided it was a good living. I mean, like I say, we didn't have a lot of money, so we didn't get to do a lot of things or have a lot of things, but we weren't poor either. I mean, we always had what we needed. So it was good.
Were you drawn to anything in school growing up?
Uh, Not particular. Math was always my favorite subject. I was always really good in math. I think I got that from my dad. He was always good at math. But as far as any kind of career or anything like that in high school, no, it just never really got into my mind. As far as the future and all.
Well, what's the story on the dairy farm? It lasted just 2 years.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever been around Minnesota, but it's pretty cold up there. Yeah, we tried. He tried to make a go of it, but it's just so cold and snow and all. I mean, it's just unless you're already established, it's hard to really get established. And with the weather and the seasons and all like that, it's hard to really get established.
Was college ever in the cards for you?
Not regular college. I actually didn't even graduate high school. I quit my senior year and joined the Navy. Uh, did 3 years in the Navy, and then like I said, when I got out of the Navy, I went to work offshore, working supply boats on the rigs. And later in life, I did go to school, aviation school for 2 years when I was in my mid 20s. I actually got a aviation mechanics license, an A&P license, and actually worked for Lockheed uh, up in Atlanta for a couple of years. Uh, then that didn't pan out, so I went back to working on the boats again.
Tell me what you can about your Navy experience from signing up, boot camp, on through your service.
Uh, Boot camp, I mean, wasn't too bad. Back in the '70s when I was in, boot camp was a lot longer and a lot tougher. I think we had like 14 weeks, I think, something like that, and but it wasn't that bad. I mean, I went in Great Lakes in the wintertime, and so it was cold. So going out and 4 o'clock in the morning, they wake you up at 4 o'clock in the morning just to go shovel snow. And you're out marching, at 6 o'clock in the morning in snow, blowing snow. I mean, so yeah, it was cold, but it really wasn't that bad. And afterwards, when I got moved out of after boot camp, I went to San Diego and ended up on a ship. Within about 2 months after I was on the ship, we left to go overseas on Westpac. So I spent the next year traveling around over in Asia. And then once we came back, the ship I was on went into dry dock, and so I got moved to Whidbey Island, Washington, and then another place in Seattle. With I don't even remember the name of the base. It's not even there anymore now. So, all in all, it wasn't too bad.
What was your day job on the ship?
I was a boiler technician, something that I don't think even exists anymore in the Navy.
Okay.
the
And
old, the old
what was the
steam, the
job?
old steam boilers.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you did that the whole time?
Yeah. Well, the whole time I was on the ship, yes. Now once I got moved up to Whidbey Island, I don't even remember what I was doing up there. Oh yeah, I did. I was actually working in a couple of different things. One was worked in the mechanic shop, working with the vehicles, and another job I had was the movie exchange, where back in those days in the 70s, the movies on the ships were actually the like 16 millimeter reels that we had to ship out. We had to send them out to the ships, and then they would send them back in, and we had to make sure they were rewound on the spools, and any bad spots had to be cut and spliced. So you know we didn't have the technology back in the 70s we have nowadays.
How'd you go from boiler technician to theater?
uh, that was just a job opening they had, because boiler technician was something that was strictly limited to just on the ships. So once I was on the land base, I mean, there's no boiler technicians there, so they had to find something else for me there. And that was one of the job openings that came up. I said, yeah, I'll do it. I'll take it. It was a pretty laid back
Gotcha.
job.
Sure, sure. So you get out of what, about 21? What happens next?
Uh, well, like I say, I went to work offshore. Went to work with a company. I don't know if they even exist anymore. Johnny Graham and Sons, on the supply boats offshore. They were a pretty big company at the time. Of course, the oil industry has all changed now. So, you know, it's all but almost all just disappeared. I mean, there's very few rigs being drilled going on in the Gulf anymore. So nowadays you pass by places and you see just hundreds of offshore boats just tied up and mothballed. So
Tell me about that job. What were you doing out there?
I was a deckhand out there. That was the first job I had out of the Navy, and and we were mostly standby on the rigs. You have to keep a boat standby at the rig at all times, and we would go out, and I think I was working 14 to 7 at the time, and they would actually fly us out most of the time on a chopper, and we'd get on the boat, and I mean, if we worked sometimes we'd work in a big field, a platform field that may have 7 or 8 production platforms around one big rig where had all the living quarters, and so in the mornings we would gather up the guys off the rigs and we would take them around to the different production rigs where they could do their maintenance, their inspections, whatever they had to do, and then in the evenings bring them back to the housing rig, and then we would just sit. We would just tie up on the side of the rig unless the weather was bad. If the weather got too bad, we weren't allowed to sit on the rig, so we'd have to go catch an anchor buoy and just bounce around. So that was pretty much it. We did a lot of fishing. Back in those
Yeah,
days, we could bring as much fish as we wanted to back. So I mean, we
sure.
were catching just tons of red snapper and bringing them back and selling them. Now the government doesn't let you do that anymore. Everything's
Right.
restricted now.
Well, and then what brought you inland?
My first wife, a lot of her family worked with ACBL, and so that at the time, and I think it still does, pays more money on inland than offshore. So that's why I switched to inland and started decking, for I actually started with a company out of Tennessee, Nashville. It's called H&S Transportation, and I don't think they're in business anymore. I think they've been gone for a long time. But started out working up on the upper, running from St. Louis all the way up to Minneapolis. So I got my feet wet running, making locks up on the upper, and I know there's a lot of them up there.
Roger.
Yeah.
Well, how was that experience from deckhand all the way up to the wheelhouse? And how many companies,
Oh,
I guess?
I actually decked for a while. I stayed on the deck for about 14 years. Well, I say 14. It was probably about 12 because I did take. Well, it's probably about 11 maybe because I took about 3 years off, going to college and all. But I still ended up a total of about 11 years decking, I guess. I pretty much, pretty much learned everything I could out there on the deck.
And how was the deckhand onboarding and training back in the day?
Mm, Probably, with most companies nowadays, I would say it's still basically the same. I mean, you put a green deckhand on the boat, and your experienced guys, are training them on the boats. I mean, all the years I've been out, just they've never really had any kind of actual deckhand schools. You know, I mean, different companies have had their own training places and stuff like that, but there's never been any real deckhand schools for deckhands to go to. So it's basically the same as they do it now. Throw them out there and say, "Here's the job." These guys will show you what to do.
And what was your journey to the wheelhouse?
Well, when I moved up in the wheelhouse, of course, they didn't have all the steersman programs and all this and that. I in fact, when I got my license, the business was, you know, they didn't really need a lot of wheelmen. I mean, everything was full. And so I got my license on my own because companies didn't even want to take the time to even bother to send anybody to school. So I did it all on my own, got my license, and I went back to work decking still. And the company I worked for, they said, "Well, we're not even going to worry about training you because we don't need anybody." And I just happened to luck out making the locks one day. A boat from another company, a little small mom and pop company, said they needed a wheelman, and so I told them, I said, well, I got a license, and I hired in with them, jumped on the boat on backwatch, and just started running the boat with no real formal training. And in those days, 80s and 90s, there was no formal training programs for wheelmen. I mean, if you could run a boat down a canal for 30 minutes, I mean, you had a job. I mean, I did when I was decking. I did have a couple of captains that would let me steer for them some and stuff like that, but it was nothing formal training. So I learned a lot just on the fly as I did it.
Sure. Any interesting stories running way upriver? You said, in that I think you said to St. Paul. Where were you running with H&S?
Yes, but now that was all decking. I've never ran up there as far as since I've been in the wheelhouse. Not that far up.
Right, but any interesting stories from
Uh,
your life on deck up there?
Yeah, the only thing comes to mind, I guess, is we had to run a light boat up the Illinois River, and I think it was in like around the end of January, 1st of February, to go take over a tow for another boat that had broke down. And I remember it was just super cold, and the river had like a thin layer of ice on it, and the boat I was on, we had the all our rigging was stacked on the front deck, and going up, the water and the ice was just kind of like sliding over the top of the bull rail. And so the next morning when we get to where we're going, our stack of ratchets was just like it was encased in a solid block of ice. And so we're out there all day with the fire axes chopping the ice out of the way to get to the ratchets. And I guess the only other thing I can remember from up there is in the wintertime, and they of course they wouldn't let you do this nowadays, but we used to take our lock lines and coil them on the barges, in a stack, and take kerosene lanterns and set down in the middle of them. and cover them up with a tarp to keep the lines from freezing, to keep them thawed out. Of course, I can only imagine if somebody's running a kerosene lantern on a barge nowadays. Imagine the Coast Guard would have a fit.
I would imagine so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so when you get in the wheelhouse, where were you working?
I started working in the wheelhouse on the West Canal, running. We ran, I mean, I guess we ran all the way. I think the furthest I went was Corpus Christi with that company. We ran from Corpus Christi into Houston, into the river, up and down the river. Even made one trip up to the Yazoo River. Never ran a boat up there before. And I went up to the Yazoo and brought five. I think we brought 5 loads of wood chips back down and went to Lake Charles with them. So it was a little small company. I worked there for about a year, before I went to, I got a job with Deloach.
Anything interesting on the transition over to Deloach?
No, I mean, other than, bigger boats, better equipment, uh, just everything running more smoothly. The company I started with was just a little company. I only had like maybe I think 4 or 5 boats, and they were small. So I jumped on the boat. Started out running a 600 horsepower boat, pushing 5 loads strung out. You know, and then of course, I mean, I had no idea that the boat was way overloaded. I just jumped on it and started doing it. So yeah, going to a Deloach, yeah, that's probably the biggest thing. Having a lot bigger boat to handle the barges we were pushing.
What anything interesting or any good memories come up of your first time at the sticks or your first hitch?
Mm. Well, probably I would say the second night on the boat, coming out of Port Island locks with 5 loads and going downriver. This is at high water, and in those days you weren't required to have radars. And also, this boat had no radars. Uh, in those days we had no computers. Computers hadn't even been thought of for boats yet, so we didn't have, we had no AIS, no charts, no nothing. I'm going down the river basically in the blind. We had no charts on the boat. No Xeon light. We had the old style bulb light that, when you shine it out on the toe, it wouldn't even reach the head of the toe. So I'm going down the river, just trying to guess at where I'm at, where the buoys are supposed to be. Which I mean, I made it. Which I just didn't know any better at the time.
Where were you running to with those?
We actually left out of came out of Port Island locks. I actually went all the way to New Orleans. So went all the way down the river like
On no charts, huh?
that. No charts, no radar, nothing.
Yeah.
just guessing at it.
So you started at Deloach as in the wheelhouse,
Yes, I already had my license when I got to do a Deloach.
and on what boat?
Oh, first trip I made with Deloach was the old Donald Clark. I made
Okay.
one trip on there.
Where'd you run?
First time on that boat, I actually ran to Point Comfort.
Okay.
Took 6 empties to Alcoa Aluminum in Point Comfort.
Was it
And
stand by to load them and come back, or what was
no,
the
they
return
already
trip?
they have a fleet there that you just drop and pick up. So
So it
we
was
were basically running between Baton Rouge and Point Comfort or either Houston. One of the two.
And how did your career progress there at Deloach?
Okay, well, I did one hitch on that boat, and then I got on the old D.O. Donham. I don't know if you ever heard of that boat. And I don't even know what happened to the boat, but I rode that boat for about 2.5 years, running basically from Baton Rouge to Houston. That was a regular run. And then after that, I got on the Alyssa, which Alyssa's still running. They're working the river now, but this was when the Alyssa was fairly new. It had only been out for about a year, and I went over there as a relief captain. and we spent a lot of time running to down here to Harlingen, running the sugar run. And that's how I ended up down here where I'm at now. They load sugar barges here to Port of Harlingen, so that's what we were doing then. Bring six empties down, and we'd stand by while they loaded, and then take them back to New Orleans. Either that, or most of the time they would send a turnboat, and so they kept us down here on this end for I'd say 6 or 7 months. I don't think we ever made it back to Houston. So that was actually a pretty good run. Then after that, I got on the Gene Hufty, on Jake Hufty, the Jake Hufty, and running the salt mines. I did that for about 2.5 years.
Do you have any interesting sea stories from any storms or anything like that that come to mind?
Uh, Not really that big a deal on anything. After the Jake Hufty, that's when Deloach started working with Ingram, and that's when I got on the Harry Brendel. And of course, at that time, all we did was run across the Sounds. We were strictly, New Orleans to Mobile. I mean, that was all we did. And we did go through some pretty rough weather every once in a while, going running across the Sounds. The only one I can really think of that comes to mind is we got hit with a storm, one of those afternoon storms going across Petty Boy, and I mean, it went from calm to really, really bad. I mean, just a matter of minutes. So we were lucky that we had enough safety lines on our tow. We were lucky we kept everything together because it broke every wire out there. So the safety lines. I mean, it was even starting to break safety lines, but it managed to calm down before it broke everything apart. That was probably the worst one. That been out there, and it only lasted a few minutes. But when those afternoon thunderstorms roll through, that's all it takes is a few minutes.
You said the whole toe was breaking loose.
Oh yeah, there was many times we broke every wire on the tow going across Petty Boy.
How
That's
much
uh
time
that's
did it? How much
uh,
time did it take to recapture everything and get secure to
oh
run
well,
again?
that was one of the things. I mean, even after breaking all the wires on the tow, I never had a barge come out of my tow. I always put enough safety lines out to where I was lucky. I never had a barge get away from me. I mean, yeah, we'd have to get across to the other side of the pass and start relaying wires, rebuild the tow. But I always had enough safety lines to keep everything together.
Is there anything on that east side run that you liked especially?
Oh, I love the East Side Run. I'd much rather be over there now, but it's just a lot of people don't like it because of the weather. Because some people just don't like that bouncing around in the Sounds. It doesn't bother me. But I like it because running over there, there's less traffic. I mean, you can run for hours and never hear anything on the radio. Uh, so it's a lot more relaxed. Way less stressful. I like running over there. Let's say you just have to deal with the weather.
What about in Mobile or Theodore? Have you ever been up the Black Warrior?
I've never been up the Black Warrior after the wheelhouse. I did deck on the Black Warrior. Now I've ran up on the 10 tom, up to we used to run barges up to Columbus up on the 10 tom, and we ran quite a bit up there, and so that was pretty good run.
Well, aside from the East Canal, is there another favorite run you've been on, whether it was on deck or all the way up to now?
Well, I mean, back when I first got my license, I was on a boat that we were running over into Florida. We would run over to Apalachicola, uh, over in that area, and even went up the Apalachicola River a couple of times. That's a pretty narrow and tight turning river. So, but well, when we would go up there, we would only take maybe one or two barges. It wasn't, we weren't pushing big tows over there.
Are you married?
Not yet. Actually engaged, but we haven't set a date yet. So I mean, we're in no rush.
Have you been married over the years? Any children?
Yeah, I've been married a couple of times, but never any kids. Never had any.
How many years were you with the Loach?
Uh, I hit 28 last year, so I'm working on 29.
And have you been on the canals that whole time?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay. I know relatively recently into last year, Intratug came and scooped up the Loach there. How's that all been going?
Uh, Things are still kind of like, I don't know how you say it, open for debate. I mean, there it takes time. So I think Intratug is still going through that transition of getting everything set up the way they want it and all this and that. So there's still there's still little things changing here and there. But I mean, so far, I mean, I haven't really had any real complaints. I mean, there's a lot of things are different from what it was at Deloach. I think Deloach was more family oriented. Uh, you know, and I have all the praise in the world for Z Dave. Z Dave was the type of person, he took care of his employees. I mean, he knew the names of everybody on every boat, deckhands included. I mean, if you worked for the company, Z Dave knew who you were. And if you had a problem, any kind of a problem, Z Dave was the type of person you could call him in the middle of the night, and he would help you out the best he could, however he could help you. He was not the type of person that say, look, don't call me at night. I don't care what the problem is. I mean, no, you could call him any time of the night if it was something urgent. Now, don't go calling him just to chit chat, but if it was an emergency or something that was very urgent, he had no problem. So he was very good at taking care of the people that work for him, and that's why I stayed there. It was a family oriented business. Now with Intertug, I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's still yet to be seen. I mean, so far, I mean, a lot of the guys working for Intertug, yeah, they call, they introduce themselves, they come out. So and the owner, he's called a couple of times. So everything so far is good. I mean, I don't have any complaints.
You were with the Loach when you went from backwash to front watch, correct?
Yes,
How was that transition? Anything interesting there?
I guess the biggest part is the extra responsibility. Keeping up with more paperwork. Which at the time when I moved up on the front watch, there wasn't as much paperwork as there is now. So it wasn't as big a deal then. You know, I'm trying to think. I think when I moved up in front watch, I think that was about the time computers were just starting to come onto the boats. We were just starting to see all this stuff, and so it really wasn't that big a deal then. It's a lot bigger deal now than it was back in those days.
Now, have you been pretty steady on crews over the years?
Uh, at times, yes, and then at other times, no. That's something, because I mean, yourself, there's a big turnover with deckhands always, and so I might get a crew that may be good and last for a year, you know, and then they start moving on, and then it might take another year to get another crew that settles in. It might take another year of just constantly rotating people because I mean, you get some deckhands that it's I'm not going to sit there and say they're bad deckhands or they ain't worth the crap or something like that, but some of them are, yes, but you get other deckhands that they personality clashes with certain wheelmen, and sometimes you have to move them around and find the right fit. And a deckhand that may not fit working with me may go to another boat and fit in good with another wheelman, or vice versa. Somebody might not fit in with somebody else, come over and work good with me. I mean, so it's kind of like a deal where you have to kind of move these guys around sometimes to see where they fit in the best. And then other times you get two deckhands that don't work good together, and so you can't keep them together. You got to split them up. So but right now, I mean, I've actually got a pretty decent crew on my boat right now.
Tell me what you can about a day in the life when you're working of a captain on that canal back there.
Ooh. Well, speaking for me, you know, we work 6 hour shifts, 2 6 hours, which most boats work that schedule. There's a few boats that work different, but most for most part, we all work six on and 6 off. So you know, for me, I'm up at 5:30 and I get dressed. I straight to the wheelhouse. I don't go to. I don't eat breakfast and all. I just go straight to the wheelhouse. You know, pull my watch. Of course, first thing in the morning, you got all your traffic and everything's got to be caught up on and all this and that. Then like I say, 6 hour shifts, so off at noon. And for me, I don't sleep a lot. Never have. I still don't. So when I get off a watch at noon, I may watch TV till 1:30, 2:30 or whatever. Then get about 3 hours of sleep. I'm back up at it again. Same thing. Most times, same thing in the afternoons. I'm up. Uh, my routine usually has me. I usually get up a little after 5, go down, eat my dinner, and then up in the wheelhouse. So then do my 6 hours, and same thing at night. Watch TV for a couple hours. I've just never been one. I guess over all the years of doing that, my body has just become accustomed to it. Just not getting a lot of sleep. Because even when I come home, I go to bed at midnight and I'm up at 7 o'clock in the morning. I just don't sleep a lot.
Well, tell me what you can about the job. Not necessarily steering, but anything else, anything not steering the boat, HR stuff, deckhand training,
Yeah.
anything. Well, what do you have to do with all that?
Uh, that probably I would say is, I don't know the word for it, individualized. I mean, when it comes to like the HR part, that is something that you've got to adapt for each individual person. I mean, you can't go in and set a certain standard, that works with one person, because then they may not work with a different person. So you have to treat each person with their own, how their personality is. Some people, I mean, I can get on to them, and get more out of them. Other people, it may be more of sitting down and talking to them man to man to get more out of them. So it's kind of one of those things you have to learn how that person reacts as to how you treat that person. And one thing I've always told everybody on the boats, and I still believe in this, is you cannot hold a grudge on these boats. I mean, if you get mad at somebody, if a deckhand gets mad at me because I get onto them for something, you have to be able to let that go. You can't stay on a boat living that close to other people and stay mad. It does not work. And that's the same with me. If I get upset with a deckhand, I mean, I'm the same way. I've got to let it go. I mean, it's once it's done and we've talked about it, it's over with. I mean, it's done. Move on.
What are the best and worst parts of being in that wheelhouse and living on a boat for big portions of your life?
Uh, Probably the being away from home, the family part. You know, because boat life, there's no way to candy coat it. It's a tough life. It's tough being away from home and being away from your family. You miss birthdays, holidays. It's something that if you want to make decent money working on the boats, you have to accept that fact. That a lot of most of the years you're not going to be home for all this stuff. You're going to miss it. And sometimes I see these guys out there every year. They're like, well, I want to be off for this. I want to be off for that. Well, you can't be off every year. You got to rotate it. So that's probably the toughest part, is just missing a lot of the family stuff.
What about the best parts?
Uh, the best parts, I mean, well, I'm not going to lie. I mean, it's good money. I mean, there's no way I could make this kind of living working, a land job at home, going home every day. There's just not, without having college education and all that. I mean, I could not make this kind of money, being at home. Like I said, you have to sacrifice being on those boats. You got to sacrifice in order to make that good living. And that's something that, if you're married, You know, it takes a special woman to be able to live that type of life. A lot
Sure.
of women will say, well, yeah, I can do it, I can do it. But when it comes right down to it, when they start doing it, they're like, oh, I don't know about this. So yeah,
Right.
that part's tough.
Well, what do you like to do in your time off?
I do a lot of woodworking. I've got a shop I've built in my backyard, pretty good size. I mean, it's 24 by 20, and I do a lot of woodworking, and that comes from my dad's cabinet shop. I do a lot of building furniture, stuff like that. That's kind of my hobby.
Is stuff for you at the house, or do you sell it?
No, it's mostly for me. I mean, I just do it as a hobby. I don't do it as a business. Now, I've had people ask me to make stuff for them here and there, and I'll do it. But I mean, I really don't make any money off of it. I mean, it's just I mean, if they want me to build something, I'll tell them well, you pay for the material stuff. But my bedroom set I've got in my master bedroom, I built it all. The headboard, nightstands, armoire, chest drawers. That's all built from solid cherry. Uh, I at one time I had an entertainment center in here I built. I took it out, so that's kind of my hobby, and I do ink pens too. I turn ink pens on the lathe. That's kind of my relaxation to go out there and work on stuff.
I think you said you're going to get married one of these days. Where'd you meet your lady friend?
She's down here. She actually works cutting hair, so got to have a haircut every now and then.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, Joe, I think that just about does it for me. That's all my questions. Do you have anything else you'd like to share?
No, nothing I could think of. Just keep working, and I'm getting close to retirement. I got about getting close to about 2.5 years to go now.
Yeah. You
So,
plan
but
it? You're gonna you're gonna
I'm probably gonna keep. I'll probably trip a little bit, Dale, here and there. After I retire, just give it up full time.
sure. You planning to stay down there in Harlingen?
Oh, what now?
You plan to stay down there in Harlingen?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. In fact, we're actually fixing to start building a brand new house.
Okay.
Yeah, we're in the process of getting that started.
Well, Captain Joe, I think that just about does it, man. Thank you for your time this morning.
All right, man. It's good talking with you.
You too. Good to finally meet you face to face, kinda.
Oh yeah, yeah. You too. Yeah, all these years of talking on the phone. First time I ever seen you.
Yes, sir. Thanks a
So,
lot for your time, man.
all right, man. Appreciate it. All right, bye.
Appreciate it.
All right.